You are now tuned into the 2-Minute Warning, a live stream community conversation pertaining to social and political issues and how we can collectively resolve them. Powered by the Westside Gazette.
Westside Gazette, and right now I'm flying solo until everybody gets in place. But we got a tremendous show for you tonight. We're going to talk about a serious issue, and to some people, it is extremely offensive, and to those who perhaps have no feelings, it's old matter of factly. But we're going to engage in that in just a few minutes. Now, I know everybody has heard or have seen the news or talked to someone concerning the shooting at FSU. And I remember back in the 70s, early 70s, when I was at FAMU, that there was an outraged student who had gotten a bad grade from one of the professors there. And that student shot and killed that professor. I can also remember being in Tallahassee at the time. Theodore Bundy was on loose. So Florida State has had its share of monster type activities. And to the families who have lost loved ones during this bizarre shooting, our hearts go out to them and to the students. No one expects to go to higher learning to not come home. And this is certainly a sad day for Tallahassee and another sad day for this country. We seem to be marred in shootings, not only from young folk, but those who are of age. And we would think that they would know how to handle certain situations and not allow their emotions to override what is happening. Now, we could perhaps blame this on a lot of things. The prevalence of guns, a administration that has opened up the door to allow guns to be readily available. The governor of Florida, the president of the United States, and a lot of our legislators have really opened up the door to allow guns and feelings just to run rampant. And unfortunately, we bear the brunt of such iniquities, if you will. I'm trying to wait until my host comes in. She was a few minutes out. Again, like I said, we had a very interesting show coming up tonight. Welcome to all the viewers who are joining us. We are well aware of the situation over in Salvador and how our president is, I don't know, man, it reminds me of the fugitive slaves law. And yet the individuals are not even enslaved people. They are United States citizens being herded up like cattle and shipped off to other places, namely those places that they wanted to leave and try to find a better way, a better life for themselves. But they find themselves in the company of, I don't want to call our current government, let's just call them disinformed, and that we have to deal with. But today's topics is one that, again, that I say is close to home here, especially being here in Florida with our neighboring country or our neighboring islands, that some of my friends are running scared wondering, Bobby, what are we going to do? My next door neighbor, who is from Cuba, even though we voted differently about our presidential choice, and he had come to me maybe a couple of weeks ago and said, Bobby, my son called me, and he reported that ICE had come into a restaurant in Miami and had taken the people out, and he was concerned. Now, there was a part of me that wanted to say, see what you did, see what you voted for. But because of the compassion that we have for our neighbors, I had to bite my tongue just a little bit, though. But nevertheless, as we prepare for tonight's show, I just want to thank you all for being here. This evening, we're talking about something deeply and personal and urgent: immigration and human dignity, and the fear many live with every single day. Who would have ever thought that your friends, your neighbors, would actually be afraid to go outside or to go to school or go to a grocery store or just socialize, period, for fear of being deported? And yet they have been here for 20 years, 16 years, 30 years, and they risk the chance of being deported. I can only imagine what kind of pressure that they live under day to day. And not only is it the Latinos or the Latinx, but my Haitian brothers and sisters, Afro-Caribbean brothers and sisters, anybody that comes here from another country is subject to deportation, with the thought and process of what this current administration is doing. Okay. I want us to be clear. The fear of being deported in this country is real. It's waking up every day not knowing if you'll come home, being separated from your family, and living under policies designed to criminalize the presence instead of honoring humanity. Now let that sink in for a minute. This is real. Okay, I see that my host is joining us. So if we can welcome Attorney Sandra Cherfrere on the set.
Hi.
Hey, how are you?
I'm so sorry. I didn't realize I was co-hosting with you today. I thought I was just one of the guests, so I apologize, because I was actually doing a segment 2 on immigration, like on race and the races. So I apologize for not being here.
No, Sandra, there's no need to. This subject is really close and dear. So no, we couldn't do this without you. So thank you for joining us. I was just doing an interlude, and I will allow you to introduce our guests. But I wanted just to briefly, and what have you heard about the situation at Florida State?
In terms, the last news that I saw was, like, we did a moment of silence earlier. The last news that I heard that 2 people passed away. I don't know if the number has gone up since then, and the other 5 were in the hospital. So it was 7 victims that I'm aware of, and so that's what I heard. And then, someone tried to politicize that event by sending me some messages about, that person hated Trump and all of that. I'm like, this is not a time to get politics. People sent their kids to school to get educated, and not for them to be traumatized by that event, So, I'm not going to use those 2 words that all the people use every time something like this happened, but I just want to let the parents know, all the students know, all the people who are working there, that we feel you, we support you, and people are going to be here to help you in any way possible. So Absolutely. That was the latest information that I had.
Okay, I wasn't too far off. I was right in the ballpark. It was with the same sentiments, but I also brought back a little history about Florida State and dealing with monsters, if you will. From the Ted Bundy and the student who shot his professor back in the early 70s or mid 70s. So they're no stranger to it. My heart goes out too. It's crazy.
Yeah, they've had something. There was actually a case that had a South Florida connection where it was a family dispute, and they killed that professor, right? Like, there was the family here hired some folks to go and kill the professor there. They had that situation. There was another this is when I learned about incels. cults, right? There was an incel situation where this young man had shot like 3 women or something like that at Florida State a few years ago. So there's been incidences where they've had to deal with this type of thing. And even though, I had spoken earlier, I'm a member of Gator Nation, and we always talk about a divide, but this is not the time for that. And not to say that other schools haven't had this problem, because before I went to law school at UF, they had a problem with a serial killer in the early 90s. So some people may not remember that. So we don't want to make it seem as though that's something that's unique to Florida State's campus. The situation with the serial killer is a little bit different in that people weren't locked in their rooms, not sure what's going on, but it was still a traumatic event. We've had this experience before with Virginia Tech, right? And people were trying to ask for gun reform when Virginia Tech happened. I think over 30 students lost their life in that incident. So this isn't something new. We've been dealing with this for decades now. And really, if we can't get something done on the gun reform side of it, we at least need to address the fact that there are people here with mental health issues. We need to address the fact that people are dealing with a lot of stressors, and we got to find some sort of relief. We got to address the fact that people don't have the same type of dispute resolution skills that they used to have before. So we need to pay attention to that. So if you don't want to take away people's gun, you got to do something and try to address the person and see how we can show them that there's alternative ways for you to deal with whatever you have going on.
Absolutely. And not only Florida State, University of Florida, it crossed the cultural lines, HBCUs, South Carolina State, I think it was, I want to say not Jackson State, but there was a school in Mississippi as well, HBCU. Mm-hmm. So violence on these college campuses is nothing new. Life-taking incidents is what we should be addressing, and not, as you said, drawing lines in the sands and saying, pointing fingers and saying this and that. It's time for us to come together. So, yeah, absolutely. Okay. I was doing a prelude, trying to stall for some time until you got here.
I'm sorry again.
No, Sandra, please. No. I wanted to continue to say that this fear of being deported, it's real.
It is real.
Yeah, it's not something you can play with. The fear has especially impacted our Haitian brothers and sisters, our Cuban brothers and sisters, the Latinx and the Afro-Caribbean immigrants, and communities who deserve protection and not punishment. So we find ourselves that's supposed to be home of the land and the brave and the free, but here we are exiling and putting people in prison. Excuse me. Okay, we're here not just to
be there. Shouldn't be there.
Shouldn't be there. We're here not just to talk about policy, but to center the people behind it, and to ask, what kind of nation do we want to be? So, okay, let's start. You want to introduce the guest?
So, believe it or not, I met this young lady. We both practice immigration law, but I met her like on Facebook. I was low-key stalking her during the first Trump administration, right? Like, so she used to post like these incredible things, that she used to say about him, and just amazing stuff, right? She was one of those people who went to buy. She tried to buy a Tesla because she wanted a hybrid, and then before Elon Musk showed who he was, she recognized game and went and got a different hybrid with a whole nother manufacturer. So she's really about that work. And she's one of those people, she don't talk about it, she be about it. So she ran. She didn't like what the Republican and Doral was doing. So she ran against him. He thought, because he ran unopposed before, didn't have to spend no money. She said, I understand the numbers. Even if I don't win, he going to come out here and try to earn his job. And she did that. So she's truly, truly about it. And the latest thing that she did, she saw that Miami-Dade went too red. She wanted to see some change that happened in the Miami-Dade Democratic Party. So what did she do? She ran for chair of the Miami-Dade Democratic Party and won, right? So let me tell you, Laura Kelley is really about that. She's really about that. And she puts her money, her effort, her time where her mouth is. And she's one of the true change makers that's in community with us.
Okay. Very good.
She knows I'm a fan.
Okay, you want to bring on Miss Laura Kelley, please. All right, Laura, how are you this evening?
Hey,
hi. I'm a fan of Sandra as well. So let's say it's a mutual admiration society.
Yes.
I'm well, but today has been a dark day. Today has been a dark day in so many different ways. Mr. Henry, you asked, what kind of country do we want to be? What are our values? And I would say, I want to be a country that upholds our Constitution. I want to be a country of due process, of fundamental rights, civil rights. And that's what is being eroded in it right now. It's been 100 days from the election. No, it's been 100, excuse me, it's 101 days today since the election. And it's devastating.
It most certainly is. I mean, I would guarantee you before this show ends, something else strange has happened, as it pertains to what's supposed to be a country of democracy. Yeah, we'll see how that goes. But I thank you for joining us. I do have a question. This Title 42, what can you explain that to us, please?
I'm Title 42.
Okay.
You're going to have a little bit more context.
Okay.
Is this the Mexico, remain in Mexico policy that trying to bring back or something like that?
Yeah, the disproportionate impact of Black and Browns. Yes, you're absolutely right.
So Remain in Mexico was a policy that they put in under the Trump administration. And in order to basically have immigration hearings happen in the United States while the subjects of those immigration hearings were in Mexico. It was a devastating policy, because what ended up happening is that there were people essentially living in tent cities without running water, people who were kidnapped, people who were murdered and injured by gang members that took advantage of the fact that, again, they had no shelter while they're out living in tents. And then that was after that was brought on. They had, if I'm remembering correctly, there's Title 42 was actually the medical.
The COVID, where they said it was because of COVID that they could refuse to allow people in or something like that.
Exactly. There's the portion of the statute, Title 42, basically said there was a public safety measure that they could prevent people from entering the United States. So those are two separate programs that worked in conjunction to keep people out of the United States. And again, having the hearings here in the United States. They were actually, Stephen Miller, the architect of all of these devastating immigration policies, prior to COVID, was looking at using Title 42 for chickenpox or for tuberculosis. They were looking for any reason to use this public safety measure to prevent people from being able to enter the United States. And then the COVID pandemic happened.
Oh, wow. Okay. Sam, this 42, why are Haitians and Cuban immigrants often treated more harshly at the borders than others?
Well, so for immigration practitioners, we're not going to agree that Cubans are treated differently, because Cubans actually have a special provision in the law that gives them benefits that nobody else have. So in terms of Cubans and Haitians being treated the same, it's actually not the case, right? But one of the things that did happen that kind of roughed up Cubans, there's two things that happened. So the Obama administration did implement a policy that kind of took away some of that benefit, because I think no matter how it is that they came in, they were allowed to adjust and everything like that. So he stopped, was it the wet foot? I think it was wet foot, dry foot, and he ended up stopping in some sort of way. So that was, people were just like, oh my God, right? And then fast forward, the Biden administration, and it was under Biden where they started doing this thing called an I-220A. Was that Biden or was this the beginning of Trump?
It was actually under the Trump administration.
So that I-220. Okay, so that's another one of the. Go ahead. You could. Okay, go ahead.
I'm sorry. Yes.
No, come on, it's good.
I've been in academics more than immigration, but I know that there was an I-228. I didn't realize it started in Trump, but it kind of carried throughout the Biden administration, though.
Absolutely. So so again, the prior to the Obama shift in policy of ending wet foot, dry foot, that policy basically said that no matter how you came into the United States, if you had your 1 foot on the ground in the United States, you were paroled in automatically if you were Cuban. And that parole is what allowed people to adjust status. So just so people are clear, that in order to become a lawful permanent resident within the United States, you either have to have a lawful entry or a parole, even for the Cuban Adjustment Act. And so they ended that automatic parole process. That didn't mean that people weren't paroled on a case-by-case basis, but there was no longer the blanket parole procedures. And then, the Trump
Laura, before you go on, so when she's talking about a Cuban Adjustment Act, what that means is that Cuban nationals were allowed to apply for their green card 1 year and a day after they came to the United States, which no one else can do that.
And not only that, but their residency, they don't have residency from the day that their residency is granted. It's actually from the day that they entered the country. So people who did get a parole in 2020, 2021 are actually, they need 5 years of residency to be able to apply for citizenship. So we have people who entered in 2020 who are became lawful permanent residents, backdated to the date of entry, then they're now eligible for citizenship.
And they're the only ones that have that provision.
Okay. These questions may seem germane and elementary, but I'm sure some of our viewers would like to know about them as well. How do we address the racial disparities in immigration enforcement, especially when Haitian immigrants have faced mass deportations while others have been allowed to seek asylum?
Well, it's such a difficult question because it really comes down to the standards of asylum law and what protection is offered under asylum. And I think there's a lot of misconceptions about asylum.
Okay.
We are in Florida, we're under the 11th Circuit. And unfortunately, what's happening in Haiti doesn't necessarily allow for asylum because it's not politically motivated or racially motivated or it's civil unrest. And while it makes sense that people should be protected by that through the asylum process, it's not one of the protected grounds. And so Haitians have a very difficult time proving an asylum case. Whereas in other countries such as Cuba, Nicaragua, or Venezuela, when someone can prove that they've been politically persecuted in their home country, that lends itself to asylum. But I want to go, the question as to the racial and ethnic disparate treatment in immigration, I think that is as part of our history in the United States, and it is deeply rooted. I have to say that under this administration, it seems that they have kind of almost equalized the playing field because they're just coming after any immigrant.
Everybody.
They're coming after everybody. So I think the only favored group actually under this administration are white South Africans, interestingly enough. I mean, so they say. And people who buy a gold card. By the way, Trump can't do that. Like, that's not.
He can't do that anyway. And most of those people that can afford that gold card ain't coming here. No.
Now, what's the nationality of the president's wife and the vice president? Would they be a part of the ones?
So isn't she like is she like Slovenian or something like that?
Yeah.
Slovenian, yes.
Yeah. Okay. And the vice president's wife, I believe she might be Indian, but she was born here. Her parents were the ones that immigrated. I think she's like a first gen or something like that. So yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Trump often evokes fear based on rhetoric linking immigration to crime. How has this narrative harmed immigrants, particularly? And Laura, I don't want you to think I'm just harping on this race thing, but particularly Afro-Caribbeans and Haitians and Cubans.
And Venezuelans and Nicaraguans.
Yeah, okay.
Colombians.
Help us understand that.
All of them.
All of them?
All of them.
The criminalization of being undocumented is something that we are seeing in this administration. And it's not like, I think the race issue is a very important issue to discuss because, it's real. But in terms of the criminalization, I want to go back to the election cycle when Donald Trump said about Haitians with lawful status, with legal status in Springfield, Ohio. He said they're eating the dogs and eating the cats. These were people who had temporary protected status, or they had parole. They had legal status and they had work permits. They were Social Security. They had Social Security numbers. They revitalized Springfield, Ohio. What I tried to say when I was on the campaign trail was when he's talking about Haitian migrants in Springfield, Ohio, saying they're eating the dogs and the cats, please don't see yourself as a Venezuelan or a Cuban here in South Florida thinking that he's not talking about you too.
Thank you.
And that's the issue, is that there's a lot of racial and cultural components in our different nationalities. But the truth is that when we're talking about the Caribbean and Latin America, we're essentially three groups of people. You had white colonizers or Anglo colonizers, you had the indigenous population, and then you had people who were brought as enslaved persons to these areas. And then so each country has its own, racial makeup and their own, issues with racism and colorism
and
in their own countries. Mm-hmm. And so what happens is sometimes somebody from a Caribbean country like Cuba or the Dominican Republic or Venezuela, they if you have somebody who is Anglo of European descent, they view themselves as a white person. Mm-hmm. And when they come to the United States, they often see themselves as a white person. But what they don't understand is that in the United States, the way that the general population views Latin Americans is different. It's they're brown, whatever their actual race. We have a box that says, when you click your ethnicity, it's that you're white or white non-Hispanic. Right. So, and so unfortunately, because of the racial and ethnic differences in these countries and in our own, when he said they're eating the dogs and the cats, they said, oh, he's talking about Black people, not about me. And what they've found out is actually he was talking about all immigrants. They said, and what I've heard from a lot of people is, oh, like you were mentioning your Cuban neighbor, I thought he was going to go after the criminals. Mm-hmm. Well, the problem is that he thinks that every immigrant is a criminal. Mm-hmm. And that's not the case. Mm-hmm. And when everybody is treated as a criminal, it gives them license to go after everybody. And that's what's deeply disturbing. And again, it informs why they are essentially what we're seeing in this case. And I'm sorry, I talk a lot, but
no, that's fine. That's fine. Go.
The Abrigo Garcia case, where a Salvadorian man was granted what's called withholding of removal in the United States in 2019. That means he had fear-based relief. It wasn't asylum. It's a standard higher than asylum that he had to prove in order to get this relief from deportation. He was granted that relief from deportation. He could be removed to another country that would take him, except for one country in the entire world, and that is El Salvador. And that's exactly where the Trump administration took him without due process. And so to see the Trump administration trying to argue that he was a gang member or he did this or he was rightfully removed, no. The Immigration and Nationality Act specifically says that somebody who has withholding of removal cannot be removed to that country because that's the country that he faced persecution in. Mm-hmm. And so the idea that they're attacking this man and attacking his character without any proof whatsoever or very thin proof, frankly, it doesn't matter. It doesn't, even if we take a worst case scenario and let's just hypothetically, which is not the case. I want to be very clear. There has been no proof that he is an MS-13 gang member. No proof. But even if he were, he still could not be removed from the United States to El Salvador. And that's exactly what they did. And that's a violation of due process. That's a violation of the Constitution. It's a violation of the Immigration and Nationality Act. And I thought that we were a nation of laws. I thought that Trump was supposed to be the law and order president, not the flout our laws president.
No, Laura, and Sandra, when you're dealing with outlaws, of which I believe the administration is, there's no boundaries in the law. They don't understand that. Now, what gets me? This is what concerns me. The fact that this young man is over in El Salvador, in one of the worst prisons that I have ever seen in my life, and watching the videos and doing some research. Once you go in, you can't come out. So now here we are. here he is, and we are, as a country, here we are faced with this man who is in this prison of no return. And now we're fighting. Some of us are fighting and trying to get him back. I really don't, and I'm sorry if I'm wrong. I do apologize, but I don't think he's gonna come back alive. I really don't.
I have to have hope. I mean, I take.
And I'm saying this, Laura. I'm saying this because and I'm with you 100%. You know, but the fact that this country, this man has created this prison for the reason that nobody comes out. Nobody. So now he's up against the entire world. He and his friend, his orange friend, you know, and now everything that they put their trust in is about to blow up in their faces. So that's my only reason. I pray that he does, but you know, it's so much fallout behind it. Go ahead, Laura.
No, and I agree, and I would say, like, I take, it's a, you know, it's being an immigrant is I can't even imagine what my clients and other people in this position are facing. I can tell you, being an immigration attorney, it is extremely dark times for us. Being the chair of the Democratic Party, it's extremely dark times. Look, when we don't understand, you know, that this poem, first they came for the immigrants, and
Martin Nehemiah, yes.
And when we don't pay heed, when they don't respect law and order, when they don't respect due process, when they don't respect the Constitution, we're next. And I'm going to give you a perfectly good example. Today in Leon County, we didn't have not only the school shooting, which is a travesty, but we had a man who came to Florida from Georgia. His name is Juan Carlos Lopez Gomez. He is a U.S. citizen who was born in the United States. He was detained by Florida state troopers and taken to a Leon County jail. The charges were dropped because they said, look, he was charged with being an undocumented immigrant who entered without authorization into Florida on a law that has actually been enjoined.
Right.
They're not even following the law in the state. Then they put an ICE hold on him. So even when the state court judge said, I'm dropping the charges because he has a birth certificate that says he's a U.S. citizen, he could not be released because ICE had a hold on him, a detainer. And so he was detained by ICE, detained in a Leon County jail, a U.S. citizen detained by ICE. Now he has since been released, but this, if we can't understand the gravity of this, because I'm going to tell you, I knew that we would have a constitutional crisis on our hands.
Absolutely.
I knew that. And that's why I ran for chair, because I said, we have to fight this. But I'm going to tell you this, what I did not consider is that we would have our government pay $6 million to essentially create a private prison in El Salvador for people who are not removable, many of them not removable. And that would be our reality, because I'm going to tell you, if you don't think it can happen to a lawful permanent resident or a U.S. citizen, imagine if they mistaken through administrative error, because it happened today, a man named Juan Carlos Lopez Gomez, right? That's a very common name, by the way, was mistakenly, because of his Guatemalan ethnicity, because he's a brown man who doesn't speak English, because he spent most of his life in Guatemala, they assumed, again, racial profiling, that he was not a U.S. citizen. You can't tell me what a U.S. citizen looks like.
How did he get to that point? How did he get stopped?
He was a passenger in a vehicle that was stopped. He was not even driving.
So now, all this stuff happened. I don't think it's just happened by happenstance. I mean,
they're allowed to profile.
Exactly. Okay.
Let me tell you one other thing too. So there's this letter. There's this letter that they've been sending out to folks. Like, you got 2 weeks to get out of the United States or whatever. And one of the stories, like, there's this American citizen doctor that got the letter. There was an attorney that received that letter. I have a client that's a lawful permanent resident that got that letter in the mail, either the email or however they're sending it. Straight panicking. I'm like, this is not for you, because it says make sure you pack your stuff up and get out of the country right now. I'm like, no, but you're a green card holder. You don't have to go anywhere. anywhere. And there are some people who are going to get this who aren't going to have attorneys that they can call or whatever, and they may start packing up their stuff or making decisions based on something that should not have been sent to them in the first place, right? So that we're dealing with that, and even with residents, right? They're lawful permanent residents. The Mahmoud case of the guy in Columbia University who's a lawful permanent resident, they're finding all kinds of ways to just even take your green card back. Now with the citizenship part, I think that's a little bit harder, unless, well, we got a Congress that ain't doing jack. But for the most part, they're supposed to take you in federal court to denaturalize you, right? Who knows what that is going to be. But people who are residents, what they need to understand is that every time you're coming in, you're asking for permission to come in when you leave, right? So people really need to be careful, because this is going to be some rough times before it's smooth.
And that's what I wanted to talk about a little bit. As a progressive movement, how can we push back against the normalization of detention centers that resemble prisons? And what lessons can be drawn from the El Salvador mega prison that some far-right leaders seem to admire?
I mean, I think that the lesson here is, first and foremost, repeat what they always say. Follow the money.
Follow the money.
Follow the money, because who's getting paid? It's GEO and Core Civic in the United States. These are the private prison industry that is the detention facilities that the federal government uses to detain immigrants in our country. We have essentially what's a private prison now in El Salvador, because we're spending $6 million taxpayer dollars to send people unlawfully to El Salvador. I mean, the lesson is that if we don't take a look at who benefits from these policies and actually what the consequences are, what Sandra has pointed out is that there's such incompetence in this administration that they can't even send an email correctly. That's on one hand, we can think that it's, that there's like a method to the madness. There is one method to the madness, and I'll get to that. But overall, it's just incompetence.
Yeah.
They are the ones screaming we shouldn't have diversity, equity, and inclusion. And everything should be merit-based, but the people that they have in their administration,
terrible, not qualified.
Because they're loyalists that will do anything, even if it means to disavow the U.S. Constitution. And the issue with U.S. citizens isn't whether people get denaturalized, but remember, in the Abrigo Garcia case, the government admitted that it was an administrative error. So guess what? An administrative error can happen to you or I as well. And if that happens, if they're saying an administrative error has a U.S. citizen sent back to El Salvador, well, then how are they getting back? Because
listen, and the person who admitted there was an administrative error, didn't he lose his job?
He's
gone.
Right.
Yeah, they got rid of him. They're like, no, you can't go to court saying this stuff, like telling the truth.
Yeah. Let me do this. I see one of our viewers is from the Belgrade Clewiston area. Which has a population of a lot of agricultural workers, and I hope that Ms. Taylor will send us a message or a question to have you guys answer. But I've had the opportunity to visit Belgrade and Clewiston, and in that agrarian area, and I want to know, as immigration's attorneys, have you gotten any feedback or anything that's happening over there in that area?
So I actually worked there from 23 to parts of 2024. I was in Belgrade, and I know. And when this first happened, there were some people in the area that got picked up, because there were some people that were on like what they call orders of supervision, or that had to report. Right? They gave them dates and said either you come and report like monthly, quarterly, whatever. Or they had some of them that gave them these phones and like take a picture every Thursday and send it to us and let us know whatever, right? So what they did to a bunch of those folks were like, they called them in early and they arrested them all, right? Mind you, some of these people already had what they call TPS granted. They had temporary protected status already approved, good until February of 26. and they detain those folks, and then people are still detained. They originally detained them here, and then they go and move them to some remote place in New Mexico or Texas or all the way to Imperial, California, where they don't have access to their family. So that's the stuff that they were doing. So when they talked about they were going to be looking after or trying to find bad hombres, that ain't what they did. They went and found the easiest people to catch and detain, because they thought, these folks, and what they're also doing is trying to pressure them to sign orders to leave, right? They said, just sign and go, because we're not going to let you out. But they're supposed to let them out, but they're not letting them out. And they're trying to wear them down and get them to just sign. And so when they do, send them back, they'll be like, no, this person signed and said that they wanted to leave, but ignore the fact that they unlawfully detained them for 2, 3, 4 months. Well, it ain't that much. It ain't even that long. It feels like it's been forever, for like 2 months, and they shouldn't have been held because they have temporary protective status. Even if he's going to take it away, they have lawful status right now and they should not be detained. They committed no crimes.
Okay,
So so that's happening to a lot of folks there, and because many of them either had applications done by what they call notarios, didn't really have counsel, because there's not a lot of attorneys in that area, right? Like they have a couple legal service agencies. Most of the people use notarios, or if they need an attorney, they're all the way in Palm Beach. Belgrade has no buses. You know what I mean? Like it's just a really tough place to navigate if you don't have a car or somebody, or you got to pay somebody transportation money in order for them to, bring you to a lawyer in Dade, Broward, Palm Beach County. So yeah, they totally took advantage of a lot of folks in that area, made them show up to what they thought was a normal appointment, and they detained them all and then sent them to New Mexico or Texas or El Paso or wherever.
This Salvadorian prison, this inhumane hellhole. I don't know if you guys have seen the documentary on it or read anything about it. Again, this is a cesspool. These men are, and I don't know about the women part, but these men are incarcerated 24 hours a day. They don't go out. They don't have any beds to sleep on. The lights stay on 24/7. It's just something unimaginable.
Is that the one where they're shaving their heads too, or something like
that? Yes.
It's a torture prison.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what it is. So here we are, this country that's supposed to be led by democracy and all that other good stuff. What can we do as the common citizens to address not only, this situation as it pertains to immigration, but also getting some kind of semblance of order restored back to the immigration system, if you will?
I think fundamentally, as citizens, we have to hold our elected representatives accountable. That's fundamental. I strongly urge people who perhaps maybe they were registered Republicans or registered non-party affiliated. I strongly suggest that people change their party affiliation to the Democratic Party to send a message to their elected officials. If you do not agree with this, they need to be in fear for their jobs in 2026, because they better be in fear. I also suggest if you are a citizen, ensure that you are registered to vote, because guess what? A lot of people were pulled off voter rolls. If you decided to sit this one out last election, I understand. Nope, I'm not judging anybody. But listen, as a chair of the Democratic Party, I don't think that I have to say, I think that we have to understand and meet voters where they're at, and people were not satisfied with the choices. In many cases, a lot of people sat home, and there's a lot of reasons why people sat home. And I just don't think the blame game is how we get people over to our side. And so from my perspective, I say, without judgment, I can have empathy and compassion and understand, look, it was not a great election cycle. The things that happened in 2024 were not what should have happened. Okay. We should have had a Democratic primary. Let's just be real. We should have had a Democratic primary, and Joe Biden should never run for a second term in office. And a lot of people felt very betrayed when they saw him in that debate, and they said, this has been hidden from us.
That debate shouldn't have happened either.
Yeah.
No,
So
that debate shouldn't have happened.
So what I'm saying is we have to have some compassion for the voter. But if you are one of those voters who decided to stay home, you may have been now, if you had been inactive, you may have been pulled from the voter rolls. So you need to make sure that you're registered to vote. And on top of that, after every general election in the state of Florida, the vote by mail is basically erased. So you no longer are registered for vote by mail. It's so important that people register, re-register for vote by mail. I know a lot of people like to vote in person, but when you have a vote by mail ballot, it arrives in your house. You get to fill it out in the comfort of your own home. You get to read everything. You can research the candidates. You can fill it out. You can sign it. You must sign it, right? And then you can actually go and drop it off. So you get to vote in person. You still get the sticker. And you should do that in early voting, by the way. I voted in like early October for the general election. And that gives you, and then also, guess what? You never miss an election because the ballot comes to your house. So we have municipal elections in Miami-Dade County for City of Miami. We're going to have an election in Miami Beach. We're going to have an election. We have a runoff election on April 22nd for Coral Gables. We have so what I'm saying is every election matters, and the way you make sure that you're not going to miss an election is if that ballot comes straight to you at your house. And yesterday we had the benefit of touring the supervisor of election here in Doral, the whole facility. And I can tell you the technology is good. I believe in the process of how votes are tabulated. What alarms me is how people are taken from the voter rolls, how voters are suppressed, how voters are misinformed. And that's where we got to work. But people to vote.
And Madam Chair, everything you're saying, that's good. That's like ice cream. But let's get down to the basics. We got people, you mentioned Doral and you mentioned the beach but we got people here in the inner city, in the hood, that doesn't have the luxury. Hell, they don't stay in one place too long to get a mail-in ballot sent to them. So let alone filling it out early and doing that. I have a problem with the Democratic Party and their messaging. I think that one message does not fit all.
That's right.
I feel really bad when we rely on our leaders who, for some reason, have drank the Kool-Aid, and now they have bought into this self-centered type of leadership. But I want to get back.
Can I say real quick? I want to just second. May I address that? Because I agree with you. Okay. That's one of the reasons why I ran for chair. We can't look at communities as a monolith. We can't look at the Latino population or the Hispanic population. Some Latinos don't want to be called Hispanic, and some Hispanics don't want to be called Latino. And it's a Venn diagram. It doesn't overlap completely, and they're not a monolith. Cubans, Venezuelans, Nicaraguans, Guatemalans, Salvadorians, Hondurans. They're not the same. And
the issues are different. Yeah, you have to approach them differently.
Black community. We can't. No, you have.
See, we know that. We know that. But if you line all up against the wall and some white person walk by, you just another one of them to them.
Bobby, that might be the case. However, the electeds have to treat them differently. That's just the reality. Anyone that's running for office, you have to treat those community differently. You have to message. Now, that doesn't mean that you walk around talking out of all sides of your mouth. That's not what that means. It's just the way you have that conversation has to be different. You can't. And like some places, you're going to have to fry some fish on Friday to come. That's right. Some of them, you got to bring them some stickers. Some people, you got to bring a t-shirt. You just got to treat those populations differently. But your message can be the same, ultimately the same message. How you deliver it has to be a different way.
Right.
Okay, let's do this.
I just want to say that because that is so fundamental, and that the problem with messaging is that it has often come from the top down rather than from the bottom up. And so when you have like the National Party coming in and creating ads for Spanish language Spanish speakers, and they're using a Mexican accent in Miami-Dade County, that doesn't land. And it's our values. We have the right values and we have the right message. It's just about how we, like Sandra said, how we deliver that message. And it requires, again, a bottom up approach, because I think in Miami-Dade, in Broward, in Palm Beach County, we should be showing the state and the country about how we message effectively to our different communities, because it's not just a Miami-Dade issue. This is all around the country. Yeah. Different groups, different messages are going to resonate with them differently, and they have different priorities. But overall, I have to say, our values are the right ones.
I know, I agree with the value thing, but that messaging sucks.
Yeah,
that I'm telling you. But let's do this. I want to go to one of our viewers.
Okay.
Ms. Janet Taylor. No, I'm not going to do it.
So we don't lose sight of it. No, because the only people that won during the Democratic cycle were the strategists, right? And they're the only ones. They came, they made their money because they cashed out and took their haul and left. Because I worked on the campaign, and I never like to say what campaign it was. And I'm telling you, like, I was just watching, and I'm like, who y'all talking to? I was like, y'all gonna lose. I wanted them to win, but I'm like, y'all gonna lose, because they don't listen. They let these people who are very disconnected with community act like they know, or they do the algorithm thought thing, and thinking like, oh well, the numbers say this. No, when you're dealing with communities of color, island folks, you better come talk to them, right? You don't listen, your algorithms is gonna make you lose every single time, because you have to establish that relationship with them to get them to be on board what you're talking about.
I agree 100%. Now, one of our viewers, Miss Janet Taylor, is from over in Clewiston, the Belglade area. She was the first Black commissioner from Clewiston. And she asked the question, hello, this is a hard time for community leaders and members. How do you suggest community leaders support members during a time like this?
See, I don't know who the leaders are. That's the thing. I argue about whether or not these people are true leaders, and because the person's elected doesn't mean that they're a leader, because people get elected for different reasons. People seek office for different reasons, right? I think there was a time maybe that people really went into service because they truly were into service. Right now, it seems like they're going in there for power. They're going there for access to information and that type of thing. So I don't know if we're really selecting true leaders that are there to actually serve. Those are the people that are really getting elected now. So I don't, I just see that question just a little bit differently.
We have a situation where we are having the state pressure cities to go into what's called these 287G task force model agreements, where they are essentially deputizing 10% of local law enforcement that are already stretched thin in terms of their budget. We have a lack of officers in many of our cities and municipalities in Miami-Dade County, and they're trying to deputize their police officers to be ICE agents. I just went to, in my community, Doral, they had a vote in the city council yesterday. And I'm going to tell you, there were 5 people who spoke up in public comments at this meeting. 5 people, and 3 of whom were residents. How we support our community is by speaking up, standing up, speaking truth to power. And again, having these town halls, making sure that people understand that our Republican Congress people are not listening. They don't care. That our state house, look at what our state house is doing. I was just in Tallahassee last week. We had 2 ballot initiatives on the ballot to amend the Constitution last election. They got 57.8% of the vote. It was not enough to get the 60% threshold necessary to pass. But rather than listen to those voters and say, hey, the vast majority of voters agree with these ballot initiatives, maybe we should change our policy to be reflective of what the voters want. Instead, what they're doing in Tallahassee is taking away citizens' rights to have ballot initiatives.
Yeah.
And so what needs to happen is we need to talk about this, and we need to activate people, and people need to stop sitting on their hands and saying, again, I think voting is important, but we, if we're not talking about congressional elections or a Senate election or a gubernatorial election, that's not until 2026. Right now, we have to be out in our communities, talking to people. We need to be supporting our communities. We need to go to commission meetings, council meetings. We need to be writing our representatives, and we need to say, "You're not on my watch. You're not doing this. We're watching you. We see what you're doing." And I really think the one thing that is really overlooked is our state legislature. This is one of the bodies, our state Senate and our state House, that have the most impact on our daily lives in ways that we don't even know. And nobody knows who their state representative is. Nobody knows who their state senator is. And they're able to get away with passing these awful laws, cutting public education. I mean, it's creating these bad immigration laws. And it's because, nobody knows about it.
Okay.
That's how we support it, is by talking about it, like what you're doing here.
Okay, absolutely. Now I know one way that really gets their attention, and we can use Target department store as an example. And all those that are on that those who have disregarded DEI on that list, is to stop spending your money with them. Be educated consumers. If you don't want to vote, don't spend your money. There's ways for us to address this issue. For those who have an angst against voting, and God forbid, but don't spend your money in the places where they totally disrespect you. I want this question here now. This is going to give us a chance, because we're almost at the top of the hour, for us to bring it home a little bit. What would a just and inclusive immigration policy actually look like? One that recognizes the dignity of all migrants, especially Haitians, Cubans, and other marginalized groups who are often erased from the conversation. What does that look like?
Okay, let me just say, I'm gonna just say.
Oh, you got on your shirt. You can look. Yes, I like that. I like that. Sapase. I like it.
Right? Yeah, so I purposely wore it today. So this is this is the thing that I think before they do anything else, this needs to happen, right? We talk about all of these undocumented folks that are in the United States right now, but what they don't say is that we have not had any comprehensive immigration reform since damn near 2000. Okay, the last person that did something that gave people the ability to adjust their status and become lawful permanent residents was Bill Clinton when he was leaving. He implemented something that's called 245I that allowed those folks that came into the country unlawfully, if they had someone to petition for them to pay the penalty of $1,000 in order for them to get their green card. Because remember, Laura said that you had to come in lawfully or you had to be paroled in to adjust. If they just bring that back, that would deal with a big number of the population. Now, there's some other things that they can do, but that they need to do, I think, is where they should start at the very least.
Agreed. But I just want to say that was actually Ronald Reagan.
No, I know Ronald Reagan. Yeah, Ronald Reagan. I got my green card from Reagan, so I'm a fan of Reagan. But what I'm saying is that it had expired in '98.
Oh, they re-upped it. Yeah.
Gave people so what he did was that provision 245I. He gave folks 120 days. It was between January 1st to April 30th of 2001 to file your applications. And if you filed within that time, when your date came up, you were able to pay the penalty and adjust. So he didn't create the law. He just brought it back up, gave it 120 days for people to file their applications, and they were able to get their green cards. And that's the clarification I wanted to make. That's what I mean.
And I agree that that's exactly what needs to happen. But we have seen that we have a Congress that will not act on comprehensive immigration reform. So even this, in 2024, when there was a bipartisan bill to actually make the border more secure, they raise the standard for asylum while also offering some benefits. It was completely rejected. When we in the Gang of Eight, back in when Obama was president, when they were trying to get the DREAM Act passed, and Marco Rubio, before he was a traitor to the community, the immigrant community, was actually one of the members of the Gang of Eight trying to get the DREAM Act passed. And there's the Republicans will not allow comprehensive immigration reform to go forward. But that's exactly what we need. I completely agree with you, Sandra, that we need to deal with. Listen, Joe Biden created a program this summer that would have allowed people who are married to U.S. citizens and who've been here for 10 years and who have no crimes to be able to get what's called parole in place so they can adjust status. That was a perfect solution for so many people who are in mixed status families who have no way of adjusting status. And what they do, they forum shopped, immediately took it to Texas, was enjoined and blocked. And so many people got their hopes up. I got my hopes up. Yeah, by killing that. So, it's again, they say the executive can't do parole in place. Meanwhile, the executive under Trump has carte blanche to do whatever he wants. This is craziness. And I think that the what we have to understand is what's the root of this. I mean, I'm just going to say it. It's Christian white nationalism. And if we
absolutely.
don't put our eyes to this, to Project 2025, we're not going to get anywhere. Because if we can't reject Christian white nationalism and Project 2025, they don't want any immigrants here. That's why they're not looking for any solution.
The crazy thing is a lot of these Christian white nationalists, they getting all that smoke too, right? So that's the part that's even more ridiculous. It's like, oh yeah, you out here mad at all these immigrants, but you losing your farm, you losing your business, you losing your Medicaid, you losing your Medicare, you losing your check, your kids can't get no lunch at school. Like y'all straight tripping, right? Like they stay tripping on what it is that they're doing.
Well, it's the belief that it can't happen to me. You know, it won't happen to me. You know, it's happening. Yeah, exactly.
And one of the things I often talk to some conservatives about is they said, we need a guest worker program because they acknowledge the fact that we need more workers. So we need a more robust temporary visa program here in the United States. I said, listen, I completely agree. We've been using the asylum process as a proxy for our guest worker program for far too long, which has watered down the asylum process and creates this distrust in the asylum process. But the fact of the matter is there's a reason why we don't have a more robust guest worker program and why they're coming after birthright citizenship. It's because they do not want the immigrants here at all.
Browning of America.
They do not want them.
But let me say this. Let me say this, and I really appreciate this conversation. But let's go back to Montgomery bus boycott, you know, and how that just shut the country down. What actually happened in actuality was, then white women said, "Man, I can't clean this house no more. You got to let them people get. You got to bring them back."
And that's why I disagree.
They don't want to do the work.
That's why I disagree that they don't want the immigrants here, because I don't think that's true. Right? Because y'all not finna go pick no lemons, no strawberries, or none of that. Y'all not finna do that.
Let me say who's they. Let me clarify who's they.
Oh, okay.
Is a population.
Oh,
they
okay.
are the architects of Project 2025 and those people in the
Heritage Foundation and the likes, right?
Exactly.
Right, but
because when our economy, I say this very clearly. What happens when we in Florida we have, and this is from the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, a conservative organization. Okay, they have a lot of research on our labor shortage. We have a labor shortage index in Florida of 5. Okay, that means for every 10 jobs, there are 5 people to fill them. So we actually need more workers in the state of Florida. And what happens when we lose a huge chunk of our labor force, especially in those jobs that white women and white men do not want to do and will not do? They will not do it. And they don't have to. What happens to the prices of our goods and services that are based on that labor? It goes up. And so we are going to have an economic crisis, well, even more of an economic crisis. We're facing a recession in the first quarter of 2026, if not sooner. And when we eliminate our labor force, for better or worse, we are going to have even higher prices. Inflation continues to go up when it was going down. You've seen that what's happened to the stock market. Unfortunately, some people, they think with their pocketbooks and not with their heart. And, so I think we have to come at it from all approaches. If you care more about your own pocketbook than what's right and what's just in the Constitution, well, guess what? You're gonna lose too, because we can't have it both ways.
So I want to say a couple of things. So first of all, the people that are falling for the okie doke of the Heritage Foundation, y'all need to stop. Because first of all, that's a small group of people that ain't got none of your concerns, right? So they're just sitting wherever the hell they sitting, making all these decisions that's straight up ruining your life, and you're letting them do it, right? Because they're not impacted by any of this everyday stuff, because they good, they straight, they got their money, they living their life, they don't even understand how it is that you're living. So that's one thing. Now, in terms of the labor stuff, well, your governor said that the 14 and 15-year-olds can start working overnight on a school night, and that's how they about to deal with the labor shortage, okay? So go ahead and send y'all kids to go work somewhere at 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. and don't worry about how they're going to get to school or if they even go to school in the morning.
While they're gutting public education, it almost seems like they don't want children to have an education.
No, the dumber you are, they love them like that. He loves them like that. So,
that's what
but
Trump said. I love the uneducated.
I love it. Yeah, exactly.
Oh,
Okay.
but he also said, and again, I still haven't figured out if this is fake news or not, is that they are going to try to get a farm worker program or a construction program because they realize that they've lost a lot of the farmers. So there's that, oh yeah, we're going to give them something they can leave and come back and whatever, listen, because I think his rich friends will be like, listen, bruh, ain't nobody finna come.
We ain't going in those fields.
Them
That's
people
right.
want me to pay them $25 an hour to pick these oranges, and I'm not about to do that. The sugarcane field is out here all jacked up because Miss Taylor from Clewiston, she know about that, right? There's big sugars over there, and they burning them fields, and who about to, they got encampments there, right? But I just want to say one thing. So my sister lives near the villages. She don't live in the villages because the village is full of old people, and most people know where the villages are, right? And she basically said that the people in the villages said, don't y'all mess with none of the migrants that's rolling through here. And so the police is not messing with none of the migrants that's rolling through the villages. Okay. So
those are the domestic workers,
the
are they?
villages like, listen, y'all take that somewhere else, go somewhere, but don't mess with nobody that you see rolling up in here.
Okay. Let's close this show out now. So we'll go around and we'll start with you, Laura. What is one thing that you would like for our audience and viewers to take away from this program and from what you're doing? And while you're doing that, put your information in the chat if somebody needs an immigration lawyer, an attorney, or your services. So put that in there.
Yes, I would say this. The one thing that I think people should take away from this conversation is that the Trump administration is incompetent and it's chaos. And they're trying to exhaust us. And they're trying to throw everything at us at once so that we get what's called learned helplessness, where we just think it's too much, we can't do anything about it. What I would urge everybody listening is do not allow them to disempower us. Do not allow them to divide us. If we are united, we cannot allow our divisions to keep them in power. We have to come together, unite and conquer. Unite and conquer. Be in your empowerment. And remember, it's we, the people. We have the power if we stand up for it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Sandra?
So my thing is like, I first want people to acknowledge what's happening, right? So the country's getting robbed in plain sight. Like, just go ahead and accept that's what's happening, right? As Laura said, the folks are incompetent. And the big thing I want people to understand is that this man did not become president because he was trying to do anything for anybody in the country, right? He became president because he wanted to not go to prison. And he also became president because he's on a revenge tour. He wanted to get back at all those people that he thinks did something to him. And that's pretty much what he's doing. So in terms of him being there to do the work of the people, don't hold your breath. That ain't what the man came to do. And he's not about to do that, right? So all that being said, everybody find your own way to resist, right? We're not sending everybody to the front line to go protest. I don't go. I ain't finna do that. But I'll come run my mouth on this show, my show, whatever like that. I'll speak and try to, do that thing, right? If shopping is the way, if you boycotting the store is the way to do it, especially for people that got big age like me, you don't need no more clothes. You don't need no more shoes. You don't need no more jewelry. You don't need no more nothing. So don't go spending your money. Like, just don't do it, right? Like, don't spend your money unless it's something that you absolutely need. There's a whole bunch of reasons. Laura just talked about how there's supposed to be a recession at the beginning of 2026, maybe even sooner. So definitely don't go be spending your money on nothing else. You do not need a new dress. I'm just telling you that, right? So just be cautious of how it is that you're spending your money, right? Again, resisting your own way, boycotting your way is doing it. If talking to folks is doing it, if voter registration is doing it, if your way is to vote, do it or find your own way to resist and don't let nobody else tell you, but absolutely resist what it is that's happening and accept and acknowledge that this man did not come here to do nothing good for nobody but himself. And I think this is going to pass, right? And just be prepared to vote in 26. I hope all 218 Republicans that are there all lose their job. And there's about 10 Democrats that I think should lose their job too. And I want, like, not only should Democrats run, I want other Republicans to run against these clowns, because them people for the last cycle, this cycle, they have not been doing their jobs. Y'all sit them there, they're getting paid $179,000 a year to pass no bills, do nothing, make noise, do insider trading and all what other legal nonsense that they're doing. So all of them need to lose their jobs. So if you and I did a video a couple weeks ago about giving Black Republicans space to like run. Listen, Republicans run against them fools, because them idiots are over there not doing jack. And none of them need to come back to work. Not a damn one of them.
Now one. Well, thank you.
All right.
Thank you both, Sandra and Laura, and to our listening audience. Thank you so very much. Let me close with this. I am one who believes in speaking daily with your dollars. And don't spend your dollars, your hard-earned dollars, where you're disrespected at. And not only you being disrespected, but to your entire clan being disrespected. So I agree with Target, and don't shop there. I agree with Walmart, and don't shop there. Home Depot, don't shop there. Don't shop anywhere where your money is not respected and they're taking you for granted. Now, I want to close out with this. As we close this discussion, let's be clear. Immigration is not a threat to this country. It is a cornerstone of it. But the systems we've inherited and reinforced, especially under Trump-era policies, are rooted in racism, fear, and exclusion. Haitians and Cuban immigrants, along with so many that Latinx and Afro-Caribbean communities, and as you said, the Venezuelans, the El Salvadorans, have borne the brunt of these kind of broken systems. We must move beyond symbolic gestures and commit to real change. That means ending detention centers as a default response to immigration, stopping deportations to countries in crisis, especially Haiti, demanding equal treatment for all asylum seekers, regardless of race or origin, investing in legal pathways, community support, and a holistic immigration reform. But most importantly, we must lift up the voices of those directly impacted. No policy should be made without them at the table. And let's not forget a fundamental truth. We all are immigrants to this country, whether our ancestors came by choice, by force, or arriving today seeking safety and an opportunity. To this land has always been shaped for migration. That shared history should unite us in compassion and not divide us in fear. So I challenge each of us, whether we are advocates, educators, voters, or just concerned human beings, to organize, to speak out, and to demand an immigration system that reflects our highest values: dignity, justice, and humanity for all. Thank you so very much.
Well said.
God bless you
Well
all.
said.
All right.